Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Bamboo Chalupa podcast. Once again, my name is Brett Snyder. I am the owner of Agora Inbound, and I am joined by Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Hello, hello.
So today we're going to be talking about what Nate and I are calling the new SEO skill set. Last week we talked about getting stuff done in SEO. And we focused on utilizing this agile methodology and Eric Ries's build, measure, learn feedback loop to kind of get you to iterate your SEO strategy in such a way that you're constantly testing and retesting your assumptions to ensure you're implementing the right types of strategies. And so that segued real nice into what Nate and I are calling this new SEO skill set. So we're going to build off what we discussed last time and focus on the evolution of SEO in recent years from a more objective scientific endeavor to the modern day integrated kind of qualitative art form that SEO has become. SEO is no longer just an independent discipline, which is why an entire new skill set, not just a skill, not just an individual discipline, but a complete skill set is needed to be successful in 2014 and beyond. So we're going to describe some of the changes that search engines have gone through in recent years, how SEOs must evolve to remain effective, and talk about where search is going so we can proactively prepare for success in this new world. And so if you're still doing SEO the way you were in 2002, not only are you unlikely to drive sustainable results, you may actually be putting your website at risk for incurring penalties that can damage your site for a long, long time. But in truth, not all of this old SEO is bad, and to understand the new SEO skill set, we really do have to have a full and complete understanding of where and how far SEO has come.
Right, and so the practice of search engine optimization has been around really as long as search engines themselves have been around. But the exact phrase dates back to 1997 when a search engine land editor named Danny Sullivan, the editor-in-chief, posted on a forum in reference to getting listed better in search engines' editorial results. And like Brett said, back in those days, and it really wasn't until the 2010s, but especially in 1997, SEO really was a true science. For a very long time, there were specific skills and tactics that only SEO specialists studied. They had the SEO magic, as it were. And that was because search engines back then, AltaVista, Hotbot, Northern Lights, they were fairly primitive, and you were literally optimizing for specific search engine ranking factors. So SEOs knew random things like keyword density and the meta keywords tag, where in the days of AltaVista, you could put your keywords in the title, make sure your keyword density was 2%, and you were golden. In fact, it was a process of crawler optimization. You literally had to, in fact, Brett, I remember back when you literally had to go and submit your site to search engines, which
I remember that too. Yeah.
Which, with clients, it's like one day they weren't in the search results and the next day they were, and it was like that little poof of magic.
It was, and there's a lot of other things that define this old way of doing SEO. Directories, simply knowing where and how to get links. Google revolutionized the game by really taking these off-page factors, these external endorsements, and working it into how search results were presented. And so we're not talking, there's still value in directories, so we're not talking that all directories are bad, but back in the day, you could go to directories that were built solely to pass SEO value. Names like allseodirectoriesforyou.com and earnseolinks.info. If you had links from those sites, they would help your search ranking. There was a process called PageRank sculpting. Anybody that's been doing this for a while knows this kind of old school method of PageRank sculpting, where you knew that there was a certain amount of value. PageRank was is Google's quality score for SEO, essentially, the value that exists in a page. And if you link out to 10 pages, each page gets 1/10 of the value. But if you were to say, I want to no-follow 5 of those links that go to other people's sites, then 20% goes to each one of the links to my site. And so I'm able to really force Google's kind of quality algorithm to say this is a better page because I'm willing to pass PageRank to those. We've got things like link wheels. We've got all sorts of stuff. I know Nate had looked a lot into the old article spinning kind of process.
Oh yeah, and which was basically a process of creating millions of pages that were semi-legible. They sort of had content, but not really. But it was at the scale of millions so that you could rank for all these terms. And this is also the time when link building sort of got the bad connotation that it has now, where you were, like Brett pointed out with the directories, getting links for link's sake. And it was because the old SEO skill set really was understanding how to take the right amount of keywords and the right amount of page rank and put them together in this formula to get rankings. And whenever you have a formula like this where it's a pure science, people are going to take it to the extreme. And this was especially prominent in the old school SEO days before 2011, where people were taking this formula and really optimizing for search engines themselves and not the people behind the search engines.
Yeah, and so to be able to really know where SEO is going in this new skill set, we have to address this idea of spammers. We don't want to give the impression that all of the old way of SEO was spam. And in any industry, there's a right and a wrong way to do things. There's a lot of ethical, above-board contractors you can hire when constructing your new home, for example. You just bought a plot of land, you want to build a house. There's a lot of great contractors that you can hire to build a beautiful home for you and your family. But for every one of those, there's 2 or 3 sleazeballs that are willing to say, hey, I'm going to cut out all the electrical wiring from the basement and then charge you full price for it. Or I'm not going to actually use insulation in the house. I'm going to use rolled up newspapers. There are always people who are willing to try to take advantage of the system for a quick buck.
Yeah, and just like in the construction industry, where it really kind of pushes regulators to evolve and create new building codes to make sure that people are getting a good product. That kind of abuse and spam was one of the big factors that's really pushed search engines to evolve and become not quite so primitive.
Yeah, and look at the idea of this, response to abuse. The other side of things is that it's always about the money. There is a lot of money in SEO. And not just saying that there's money in practicing SEO or being an SEO consultant. There's a lot of money in ranking #1 for a commercial phrase. And this type of opportunity draws opportunists. And the greater the opportunity, the smarter and better financed opportunities or opportunists, that it attracts. Thing you also got to remember though is there's a lot of money in SEO when it comes to the search engine themselves. Google is a publicly traded company. They have shareholders that they are responsible to. They have to report on their earnings. Google makes all of their money, almost all of their money, 98+% of their money from AdWords ads and different display network and basically their ads. Google makes almost all of their money from ads, but nobody comes to a search engine to be served ads. They come for the organic results. This most highly relevant, curated list of resources that has ever existed draws from all the deepest, darkest corners of our collective consciousness. Google wants to organize the world's information. But in doing so, they have also built a product that is used almost, depending on the metrics you look at, you can say 500 to 650 million searches a day. There is a lot of money and a lot of activity that goes on with these search results. And so people are actually willing to go in there and say, I don't necessarily need to curate the right signals. I just need to curate the signals that work right now. And there are this new SEO skill set that we're going to go into some specifics a little later in the show. But this new SEO skill set tries to balance those two audiences. They try to balance the business owner that wants to say, hey, I actually do sell this product. I have a very legitimate business and I want to make sure that I am present for that. And the search engine that wants the best possible list of resources available. And so really the spammers, the bad SEOs, the black hats as we call them, they look for the loopholes. And they try to exploit these loopholes. And when Nate talked about this idea of abuse, and he kind of alluded to the change that happened in 2011, it really was a direct response to this abuse of their search results and this manipulation of their product.
Yeah, and it really did all come to a head in 2011, 2012 when two of the most famous updates rolled out, Penguin and Panda, and it tied back a lot to what Brett mentioned with the money. This is back when Google was scared to death of the Facebook threat, the Twitter threat, and they were getting a lot of criticism for basically demand media and Answers.com and WikiHow just flooding the search results. And so those two updates focused on the most egregious areas of abuse, low quality content, low quality links. People had figured out, that they could manipulate Google's algorithm. They could manufacture these fake signals, and that they could do it at scale. But Panda and Penguin, two of the biggest updates, that they're still being tweaked to this day, they were a direct response to that type of manipulation. But, again, at their very core, those updates were really nothing more than closing of loopholes that were hurting Google's product. And just kind of part of other trends where that have been driving a lot of development, not just in SEO, but also in PPC and other areas of marketing, which specifically competition among other properties, other websites themselves.
Yeah, and when we talk about competition, and Nate and I have done this on, in each of the shows we've done so far, we tend to use search engine and Google synonymously. Because Google's got, 67, 68% market share, I think, as of latest numbers. They are still the giant. If you want visibility, you can't ignore Google. But there are other search engines that people are going to. Google has said themselves, I think it was Larry Page who said, our competitors are just a click away. Our users are one click away from going to our competitors. And not just your Yahoo and Bing. You're talking about your Amazon.com for e-commerce queries. You're talking people going directly to Wikipedia if they want information. You're talking about people going directly to the number 2 search engine in the world, the one that's owned by Google, and that's YouTube. Google has competition for their product, and the point here is that this competition has forced search engines and people like us that are hoping to optimize for these search engines to become more specialized. We have to understand the nuances of our audience behavior and how the individual search engine that we are optimizing for help meet that user behavior.
Oh yeah, and it's because not only is Google improving their product and trying to get better, which is driving SEOs to get better, but you're also competing with other sites. Everyone is on the internet now, and if you don't have a website, you don't really have a business. Back in 2000, the joke was that, are people looking at the yellow pages or are they looking for you online? And you could just put up a website and sort of win. But now it's not just your competitors. There's lead generation sites that all they do is exist to get traffic, get the lead, and sell it back to your competitors. And even though everyone is online, there's still 10 results on the first page. And that money and that drive from Google and that competition is going to drive a better product and a different world. Okay, so search engines are different, competition is higher. What does that actually mean for SEOs? It's not this formulaic approach. Brett, what would you say your definition is now in 2014?
So I've kind of gone into the difference between a skill versus a skill set. I'm actually going to go one word prior when I kind of redefine my definition here, and that's the idea of SEO in general. Search engine optimization, I will not use the phrase SEO is dead. Anybody in the SEO industry knows how painful that phrase is to hear. But the idea of optimizing for search engines, this way of crawler optimization that we heard Nate talk about back from 1997, it's never going to die, but it's dying. This practice of solely optimizing for search engines is not going to be effective for that much longer. And so when we think about the new SEO skill set, it has to look at kind of where Google and the other search engines are trying to go. We need to consider things like semantic search, which really at its most basic level is Google and other search engines want to return results based on what a user means as opposed to what they say. We have to understand how quality is defined. We have to understand what is a signal or a factor that helps support quality. Search engines want to use social signals. Right now, they aren't really using social signals because they don't have an effective way to do that. but the web is starting to evolve into a much more social medium. And so it would be ignorant to argue that there are no loopholes in SEO, that's this black hat spammer activity is not going to still be successful in some industries. But we'd also be naive to think that search engines are not going to figure them out. This is the most powerful algorithm ever developed. I said it before, depending on the metrics you look at, almost 20 billion searches a month on Google alone. The way people search is evolving, not just words on a page or raw number of links. So the new SEO skill set has to understand that we're optimizing for more than users, that we understand the wants, needs, and desires of our audience, not just people who use search engines, but the audience that specifically wants our product or service. And we have to find a way to authentically engage with that community across multiple channels, using multiple mediums, and at any time of the day that audience chooses to engage with us.
Yeah, I like that. My definition would be focused more on the actual SEO person that's trying to implement all this and looking at the big picture. And I would actually say, like you said, with SEO isn't dead, it's changed. And my definition would be that SEOs are really more of earned marketing generalists. So that's 3 bits of marketing jargon that I want to break down individually. So I would say basically that SEOs are the ones responsible for getting non-paid traffic to your website. So you're not paying for the clicks. You're getting this traffic, quote unquote, free. You're earning it. And you focus on Google because that's where the volume is, but you look at everything where you can get links, mentions, and involvement because that's where Google is looking. So first, you have to have, more than anything, you have to have a deep curiosity and understanding about the web. You have to understand how apps, blogs, websites, media publications, and different platforms all play together. Sort of like a web developer with an eye of marketing to Google, trying to understand, what is Google trying to accomplish by organizing the world's information, and looking to see how your website fits into that plan. And I think this kind of counteracts, the tendency of SEOs to chase the shiniest thing, chase authorship or chase HTTPS. There's a lot of shiny tactics that you can chase, but if you have an eye for what's the big picture, where's Google wanting to go, you can figure out how your website actually plays into that plan. And second off, you have to be able to find and follow threads efficiently and execute on the opportunity you find. And again, this isn't a specific skill like copywriting. It's just a way to creatively think and see where the problem is and find a solution. Why is this part of my site not being indexed? Why is this random forum sending me traffic? Why are all these search results for terms that I want to rank for government sites? Why are we not ranking there? There's no certification or training for this skill. It's just constant practice and thinking in different ways that other people are not thinking, which I think third ties into the third skill, which is that you have to be cross-disciplinary and cross-channel. I think that the generalist part of the SEOs is that we can look at all these different channels, the newest developments in PR, the newest developments in web development, the newest developments in web copywriting, and see, look at all these trends. How can we tie all these together to make the best website possible that Google is going to want to rank because it's the best thing to show to their users?
And just to say that another way is, what is going to be the best website that is going to solve a user's problem? Remember that search engines ultimately are it's a discovery. It's an opportunity to discover new information. You go to a search engine because you have a question. Ever since Ask Jeeves left, people don't necessarily search, where is pizza near me? You just type in pizza. But really, you're looking for pizza near you. If you type in kind of an e-commerce or a product query, you're probably either looking for information about that product or a place to buy it. If you type in a service, you may be looking to hire somebody to do that service, to learn a little bit about it on your own, but you're ultimately asking the search engine to present you with information that answers your question. And so when Nate talks about this whole idea of cross-disciplinary and cross-channel and being an earned marketing generalist, it really comes into identifying what questions that people are asking, and then how can you provide answers for them. And the real kicker here that kind of ties it all together, this number one skill in the new skill set, is the ability to do it at scale. You know, and a lot of people that you will talk to will say anybody who says they can do SEO at scale is a liar, because it takes a lot of very specific development of strategies. It's different for every industry. It's different for your product. It's different from one search result to the next. But when we talk about doing SEO and trying to get visitors at scale, we're talking about looking at these different channels, looking at what different trends in copywriting, or where are people going to find their news? What is a good place to get a PR mention these days? You know, how should your website be structured? Nate mentioned HTTPS. Earlier this week, or was it last week? I think it was last week.
Yeah.
Google announced that HTTPS is now going to be considered one of their ranking factors. You know, take that for a second and think about it. They're telling you what it's going to be. This is something you can do at scale for any website that you manage to be able to give yourself a little boost. Now, you should understand that a ranking signal means it's one of 200 plus that is weighted differently based on how they do. So it's not going to change the world for you. But you want to find the few things that you can do and that you can do consistently, your best practices essentially, that work for your industry, that help you authentically engage with your audience and present your audience and the search engines with information that helps solve a problem.
I like that. Yeah, and so examples of that, would be if there's a technical issue, can you fix thousands of those all at once with, a simple edit to your robots.txt? Can you envision the right resource section that will, over time, generate more traffic than spending all your time trying to get, one press mention? And can you develop strategies, that will attract people to your audience versus going out and getting them, one at a time?
And can you find places where consistently that you can have an engaged audience? Mm-hmm. Can you almost, I'm going to reference a community that absolutely hates SEOs and marketers in general, but can you find a community like Reddit? Can you find a group of people who are willing to go in there and say there is a very specific way that Redditors communicate with one another? And if you understand how to communicate in that language within that community, you have an immense opportunity to reach people that share a lot of your interests. I know Nate's done a lot of research, and there's some posts up on ShiverWeb about how to use Reddit as part of a marketing strategy, but you have to be very conscious of the fact that who your community is and who you're talking to. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about this idea of scale. We're talking about going out there and being able to say, what can you do? What can you replicate? Maybe not exactly the same, but what process or what approach can you replicate from one client to another, from one industry to another, that helps you solve the two problems that we're looking at, the search engine problem and the user problem? Where those intersect is the new SEO skill set.
I like that.
And so we did this last time, and we got a lot of good feedback from this, but probably a lot of you who are listening are saying, you know what, this sounds great. New SEO skill set, not universal. Not universally adopted. You can look at these SEO packages that people offer and these predefined project plans where they just drop in a new client name and they follow the same process every time. A lot of SEO is still done the same way that it was in 2006. And so we're going to revisit our Devil's Advocate segment. And I'm going to pose Nate the question this time. And I'm going to ask him just the one question. I'm going to ask him why people are still doing the old SEO and not embracing this new SEO skill set.
Well, I would say it's pretty simple, and it goes back to search engines. And as AJ Cohn, who's one of the leading thinkers in the SEO industry, might term it, SEOs are blind 5-year-olds. They're still a very unique medium that you have to treat them differently. Google is not Skynet. It's not the third half of a human brain. It's still just an algorithm written by humans who are trying to find the best possible solution, and that algorithm needs a lot of coaching. So even SEOs who've adopted the new skill set, they're still going to be tweaking content to making sure your exact match keyword shows up. Looking at your link profiles of not only yourself, but also your competitors, seeing how many they have and where they have them. Looking at crawl rates, how many pages is the Googlebot actually looking at every time it visits your site? There's a lot of these remnants of old school SEO that, that's not, new copywriting or PR. It's specifically optimizing for search engine ranking factors, whether it's links or keywords on the page. Old school SEO, it's not going away. And until Google becomes alive, it's not going to go away anytime soon.
And so what it sounds like here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're kind of talking about this idea of a balancing act. You're talking about the fact that, search engines tell us to do one thing. It isn't ideal, but ultimately we have to understand what it is from the old ways that still work, what about optimizing for search engines is still relevant, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we are looking forward and we're not going to be caught on our heels with the next update. Google's updates are they're not that surprising. The changes that happen with these updates are really not that surprising when you sit down and think about it. If you look at some of the sites, Nate mentioned demand media, eHow is one of the big ones that got hit. If you look at some of the content up there, there was literally content on eHow titled "How to Drink a Glass of Water." That is the type of content that Google does not want to reward a domain for producing. That does not answer any sane person's question. It was not funny, it was not a joke, it was literally a step-by-step guide for drinking a glass of water. And it was done because having content on your website is something that Google looked at as something that determines quality of your domain. And so Nate kind of talked about this at the very beginning, and I want to go back to it because your explanation of kind of why this isn't universally adopted and this blind 5-year-old approach, and I know AJ Cohn is a great thinker, absolutely somebody that I think both of us would recommend that our listeners check out.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the idea of swimming with the current. You want to make sure that you know where the industry is going, where are the trends going, and to know that you have to know where they came from. But again, you want to make sure that you are going with the current as opposed to striving for some ideal that may or may not be realistically attainable. And so it's going to be different based on your audience, your industry, your product or service. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, but Google is, again, it is an algorithm. Yahoo is an algorithm. Bing is an algorithm. Amazon, Wikipedia, all of these things generate their content and their individual results based on algorithms. Wikipedia a little bit more on the user generated side.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah, it's but when you get to the issue of scale, it gets so big where you have to make sure that you keep the same mentality.
Yeah.
But really, it's making sure that you're going with the current. And anybody that's ever gone, skeet shooting, or you see the advice for that. You always shoot a little bit in front of that clay pigeon because you need to give a chance for it to come into the path of your shot after you've already taken it.
I like that.
And so as we kind of wrap this up, we want to wrap it up with a couple of rapid fire segments. So I want Nate to run through his top 3 tips for the new SEO skill set.
Okay, so number 1, understand why what you're doing works. So correlation does not always equal causation. Just because you went out and bought a link package for $25 off Fiverr, or I guess it would be $5 in that case, and you suddenly rank for your top term, that does not mean that you're ranking because you bought that link building package. You need to understand why what you're doing works so that you can continue to do the correct thing over and over again. Number 2, subscribe to curated feeds outside of your niche. So whether for marketing, inbound.org is a great place. growthhackers.com is a great place. A lot of times looking to see leaders in the industry on Twitter, following who's the best people in PR, who's the best people in copywriting, who are some PPC folks that you should follow. And again, this doesn't mean you need to be an expert in PPC to be an expert in SEO, but a lot of times if you just understand what's hot and what's working in different niches, you can get ideas and apply it to your SEO efforts. Number 3, study websites that do well without SEO. Square, Dropbox, until just a few weeks ago, they literally had 3 words on their page, but if you looked for online storage, you would still find them. And not only that, everyone has heard of them. They didn't have an SEO strategy, but they still dominated their online marketing. Understand, what did they do that you can learn from? A lot of times it's best practices are just that. They're best practices. They're not always perfect practice, and they don't always apply to specific businesses. And a lot of times there are things that you can learn from people who are the outliers.
Right. And when you talk about the things that from people that you can learn from, make traffic diversification one of your goals. Don't put all of your eggs, just like you say, don't put all of your eggs in Google as the one basket. Don't assume that organic is the only non-paid channel that you can, pull visitors in from. Invest in a social media platform. Find what works best for you. You don't have to have, it takes a lot of work to have a Facebook, a Pinterest, a LinkedIn, a Twitter, to have a Google Plus account, and to actively maintain all of these. Find what works for you in your industry, but make sure that one Google update is not going to completely sink your website. Stay focused on what works. We talked about, Nate went into a lot of great detail about the old SEO skill set and some of the things that still work. Understand if there are risks involved. So understand if it violates the guidelines, but assuming it doesn't violate the guidelines, stay focused on what works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you know that I'm writing quality content, and I have been for years, and I run a blog that talks about car maintenance, and every week I put out a very in-depth article about another common car problem, and that's been successful, stay focused on what works, but also keep your eyes to the trends in the industry and where Google is going, because you don't want all of a sudden for what works, again, traffic diversification, but make sure you're focused on what works, but understanding that your eggs cannot all be in that basket either. And the last tip, which kind of sums all of it up for us, is, kind of don't drink the Kool-Aid. Is really the simplest way to put that. Nate and I have given you a lot of advice, a lot of kind of our insights into where the industry is going, but understand that your industry might be ahead of the curve, it might be behind the curve. Your audience may still want to communicate via a forum. Trying to get them to participate in a Google Docs survey may drive them away. Trying to get them to like your Facebook page may drive them away. So don't drink the Kool-Aid and just simply follow the next shiny thing, but make sure that you're actually looking at what is going to solve the problems of your users. Focus on those users and engaging with them where and how they want to be engaged with, and just always stay focused on where you want to go with your business as opposed to just focusing on where you are.
All right. Well, you can find show notes, links to things we mentioned, and our contact information at bamboochalupa.com. Please subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and leave a comment while you're there. It gives us great feedback and it helps others discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thanks for listening.